Every dysfunctional family requires a sacrificial lamb to maintain its illusion of perfection. If you were the one who always pointed out the problems, you didn't fail the family, you were systematically chosen to carry their sins. But this dynamic takes on a terrifying new dimension the moment you bring a child of your own into the world. Picture this. You are sitting in the quiet dark of a nursery, the rhythmic breathing of your newborn anchored against your chest. You are exhausted, raw, and completely transformed by the overwhelming gravity of becoming a parent. You promised yourself, in the quiet solitude of those sleepless nights, that this child would never know the chaos you grew up with. You swore to break the cycle. You vowed to be the firewall between your baby and the generational trauma that defined your own past. And that is exactly when the trap snaps shut. Because a toxic family system operates like a parasite, and it recognizes a threat to its survival long before you do. When you became a parent, you fundamentally shifted your allegiance. You stopped being the compliant shock absorber for their dysfunction and started becoming the fierce protector of your own blood. You drew a hard boundary. You finally said no. You demanded the basic respect that had always been denied to you. To a healthy family, this is called growing up. To a narcissistic family structure, it is an act of high treason. When this profound awakening collides with a high-conflict divorce from their chosen golden child, the machinery of destruction kicks into high gear. Suddenly, you are no longer just the difficult black sheep of the family. You are a hostile insurgency. The family unit instantly circles the wagons to protect your ex-partner, seamlessly rewriting history to erase your contributions, your daily sacrifices, and your very sanity. They desperately need you to be unstable. They need you to be the villain in this story. Because if you are the villain, then their hands are completely clean, and their precious illusion of normalcy remains intact. You start to notice the subtle, chilling shifts. The invitations that never arrive. The entirely fabricated stories filtering back to you through mutual friends. The way your most vulnerable moments you shared in absolute confidence, are suddenly weaponized and broadcasted to the world as concrete proof of your incompetence. They take the intense vulnerability of new parenthood, the severe sleep deprivation, the natural, overwhelming anxiety of keeping a tiny human alive, and they deliberately frame it as madness. They are not just trying to win a breakup. They are trying to systematically dismantle your reality. They are trying to sever your confidence as a mother, as a father, as an independent provider. They know that if they can break you right now, in your most exhausted and vulnerable state, they can maintain absolute control over the narrative. And more importantly, they can secure access to the fresh, unblemished emotional supply of your new child. You think the sudden whispers and the cold shoulders are just the messy fallout of a bad breakup. But as the smear campaign begins to bleed into your career and your ability to provide for your new baby, you realize a horrifying truth: this isn't a misunderstanding. It is a carefully orchestrated execution. And they are just getting started. The architecture of a smear campaign relies on a terrifying, silent agreement among the people you once trusted most. In the theater of a high-conflict divorce, your family doesn't just take a side. They crown a new monarch. Your ex-partner, the very person actively attempting to destroy you, is suddenly elevated to the untouchable status of the golden child. Why? Because a toxic family system and an abusive ex-partner share the exact same goal: maintaining absolute dominance over you. The enemy of their enemy becomes their ultimate weapon. By adopting your ex as the flawless, blameless victim, the family achieves its primary objective. They isolate you completely. You are no longer just fighting an unreasonable individual in family court. You are fighting an entire intelligence network. You are facing an invisible army composed of the very people who watched you take your first steps, who sat at your graduation, and who held your newborn baby in the hospital. This is where your life shifts into a psychological thriller. It is the blood-chilling realization that your entire history is being actively mined for ammunition. Remember that time years ago when you confessed to a sibling that you were struggling with anxiety? Or the private, tearful breakdown you had with a parent over the immense stress of balancing your career and a new baby? Those were not sympathetic conversations. They were depositions. You were bleeding, and they were quietly collecting the blood, storing your deepest vulnerabilities in a vault, waiting for the precise moment to weaponize them against you. Now, those deeply personal confessions are being contorted into vicious, calculated narratives designed to prove you are an unstable, unfit parent. But the invisible army does not stop at the borders of your personal life. A toxic system understands that to truly break a scapegoat, they must cut off your escape routes. They must shatter your independence. The smear campaign begins to silently creep into your professional world. It manifests as anonymous, defamatory messages sent to your employer. It looks like concerned relatives suddenly reaching out to your professional network, planting subtle, poisonous seeds of doubt about your mental stability. The most insidious part. They frame their sabotage as deep, loving concern. They whisper, "We are just so worried about their stress levels," or, "They simply haven't been in their right mind since the baby was born." It is calculated character assassination meticulously dressed up as a rescue mission. They desperately want you panicked. They are trying to provoke a reaction. They want you lashing out erratically to their constant provocations, so they can point their fingers and say, "See? We told you they were unhinged." If they can destroy your professional reputation, they can drain your financial resources. And if you are bankrupt, you cannot afford the legal defense required to protect your child from their grasp. You are standing in the center of a burning room, realizing that the people who lit the match are standing right outside, loudly playing the victim. The betrayal is absolute. The isolation is suffocating. Every text message is a trap, every concerned phone call from a relative is a fact-finding mission, and your professional reputation is hanging by a thread. With a newborn sleeping in the next room and your livelihood under attack, you have to figure out how to fight an invisible army that knows your every weakness, before they take away the one thing you are fighting for. When you are the target of a coordinated smear campaign, the world shrinks to the size of a suffocating room. You find yourself in the agonizing, humiliating position of having to defend your basic grip on reality. Friends mysteriously stop returning calls. Mutual acquaintances look at you with a mixture of pity and suspicion. The narrative your family has spun is so massive, so intricately woven with half-truths and stolen secrets, that untangling the lies feels like trying to hold back the ocean with your bare hands. You are hemorrhaging social capital, and you are bleeding financial resources. Family members you once loved are now actively funding or providing testimony for your abusive ex-partner's legal strategy. It feels like an unstoppable avalanche of betrayal. To the outside world, and even to yourself in the middle of the night, it feels like they hold all the power. But right now, for the sake of the child sleeping in your arms, you need to completely reframe how you see this attack. You need to look past the terrifying smoke and mirrors of their assault. This brutal campaign is not a demonstration of their strength. It is a manifestation of their absolute terror. For your entire life, you served a very specific, structural purpose in that family. You were the designated container for their dysfunction. When they needed to project their guilt, their shame, and their toxic behavior, they dumped it onto you. You were the human pressure valve that kept their illusion of a perfect family from exploding. But the moment you became a parent, you fundamentally changed the rules of the game. You closed that valve. You refused to be their emotional landfill anymore. You started demanding boundaries to ensure your baby would never grow up breathing their toxic air. Your independence is a structural emergency for them. If you are no longer the broken, problematic one, they have to look at themselves. They have to face the devastating reality of who they actually are. And a narcissistic system will burn the entire world to the ground before it engages in a single moment of self-reflection. So they panic. The intensity of their smear campaign is directly proportional to their fear of your newfound strength. They are trying to bankrupt you socially and financially because a broke, isolated, terrified parent is easy to drag back into the fold. They want you crawling back, begging for their help, proving to everyone that you are just as dependent and unstable as they always claimed. You are desperately trying to build a safe, peaceful home for your newborn, but they are systematically dynamiting the foundation. Every day feels like a losing battle against a tidal wave of manufactured chaos. The walls are closing in rapidly. The traditional advice of taking the high road or keeping the peace for the sake of the baby is exactly the trap they are counting on you to fall into. To win this war and protect your child, you are going to have to do the one thing society tells you is utterly unforgivable. Society conditions us to believe that blood is an unbreakable covenant. We are bombarded with the narrative that family is everything, that forgiveness is mandatory, and that denying a child access to their extended family is a deeply unnatural, unforgivable sin. The flying monkeys, those well-meaning friends and distant relatives, will deliberately weaponize this guilt against you. They will plead with you to be the bigger person. They will tell you to just swallow your pride, make peace, and compromise for the sake of the baby. But you cannot negotiate with a parasite. And you do not invite arsonists into your home just because you happen to share their DNA. To protect your child, you must deploy the most devastating, misunderstood tactic in the survivor's arsenal. You must execute the gambit of absolute silence. You must initiate strict, unyielding, permanent no contact. This is not a timeout. This is not the silent treatment. The silent treatment is a manipulative game designed to elicit a reaction and punish an opponent. No contact is a reinforced steel vault door slamming shut to protect your life. It means blocking every phone number. It means shutting down every avenue of digital access. It means when the inevitable bait is dangled, a frantic email, a fabricated family emergency, a surprise package left on your porch for the baby, you do not respond. You do not explain. You do not defend your character. You become a complete and total black hole. For a scapegoat who has spent their entire life over-explaining, over-accommodating, and desperately fighting to be understood, dropping the rope feels completely counterintuitive. It feels terrifying. You are deeply conditioned to believe that if you don't actively defend yourself against the lies, the world will automatically believe them. But here is the strategic brilliance of absolute silence. It is a tactical nuclear strike on a narcissistic power structure. Toxic family systems run on a very specific currency called emotional supply. They feed on your outrage. They sustain themselves on your grief, your panic, and your desperation. Every time you engage, every time you send a furious text message defending your honor or proving your sanity, you are handing them the exact oxygen they need to keep the fire burning. You are proving to them that they still hold the remote control to your nervous system. When you disappear into absolute silence, you sever the fuel line. You deny them the spectacle. You deny them the courtroom drama they so desperately crave. And this is when the true collapse of the toxic family unit begins. Remember, you were the designated pressure valve. You were their emotional landfill. Without you there to absorb their projections, their guilt, and their deep-seated shame, the poison has absolutely nowhere to go. It begins to back up into the system. The pressure builds dangerously. The parents who orchestrated your downfall, the compliant siblings who nodded along with the smear campaign, the abusive ex-partner they elevated to a golden child, they are suddenly trapped in a room together, choking on their own unvented toxicity. The illusion of their perfect family starts to violently fracture because the foundational pillar of their dysfunction, your suffering, has been completely removed. Silence becomes your ultimate weapon. As you drop the rope and disappear from their grid, the toxic system begins to cannibalize itself, collapsing under the weight of its own unprojected shame. But when a narcissistic structure suddenly loses its favorite target, a dangerous new question emerges: who will they turn their crosshairs on next? When a toxic family system loses its primary shock absorber, it doesn't suddenly heal or see the light. It simply panics and searches for a new host. Without you there to carry the heavy burden of their collective blame, the enablers and the newly minted golden child will inevitably turn on each other. The very ex-partner they ferociously protected will eventually expose their true, destructive nature to the family unit. Let them. Let the wolves turn on each other in the dark woods while you build an impenetrable fortress on the other side of the mountain. You may look around right now and see only profound devastation. You may feel like you have lost absolutely everything: your good standing, your extended family network, the shared history you once believed was real. It is a deeply painful reality, and mourning the illusion of the family you deserved is a necessary, quiet grief. But you must understand that what feels like a brutal, forced isolation is actually a magnificent quarantine. You haven't been banished from the kingdom. You have been liberated from the asylum. The vicious smear campaign they waged against you was never a reflection of your character, and it certainly wasn't a measure of your worth as a new parent. It was the frantic, dying gasp of a generational curse trying desperately to drag you back into the cycle. Every lie they fabricated about you, every professional relationship they tried to sabotage, every calculated attempt they made to break your sanity, it all failed. Because you are still standing. The ashes of the reputation they burned to the ground are the exact fertilizer you need to build an entirely new reality. You are now the sole architect of your environment. You are creating a life where your value is not dictated by how much abuse you can quietly absorb. A life where love is entirely unconditional, where vulnerability is cherished instead of weaponized, and where profound peace is the daily baseline, not a rare luxury. Walk back into the quiet dark of that nursery. Look at the child you are fiercely protecting. Because of your absolute refusal to surrender, because of the terrifying, steel boundaries you established and the unyielding silence you maintained, that baby will grow up in a completely different universe. They will never know the agonizing feeling of walking on eggshells in their own home. They will never have to shrink themselves down to make a toxic grandparent feel comfortable. They will never be forced to perform for scraps of conditional love, or carry the heavy, crushing weight of adult dysfunction. They will only know absolute safety. They will only know a mother or a father who loved them enough to go to war against an invisible army, and win. You did not fail your family. You succeeded in saving your bloodline. The scapegoat was never the defective link in the family chain, they were simply the only one strong enough to shatter it completely. The generational curse ends with you. The only question left is, are you ready to walk away and build your empire?